I had been gone exactly 1 week. A cattle auction had taken me away from the property for 7 days, 7 unremarkable days, as far as I had any reason to expect. And when I turned back on the road leading home, I genuinely believed for a moment that I had made a wrong turn somewhere. The structure sitting directly across my driveway was not a temporary obstruction or a piece of misplaced equipment. It was a fully completed 3-car garage, constructed with apparent permanence and positioned with a precision that managed to block my access to the road as thoroughly as if it had been designed specifically for that purpose. In a sense, as I would soon discover, it had been. My property's connection to the public road ran through a legally recorded access easement, a documented, filed, county-recognized right-of-way that had existed long before the surrounding development and had been a known feature of the property's legal description for years. Without that driveway corridor, my home was not merely inconvenienced. It was landlocked, completely enclosed, no alternative route to the road, and no practical means of ingress or egress. The easement was not a preference or a gentleman's agreement. It was a property right, recorded in the official records, enforceable in court, and legally inseparable from the deed. Whoever had approved the construction of that garage had either never consulted those records or had consulted them and proceeded anyway. Either possibility was deeply problematic. The workers on site told me what I had not yet fully processed. They had been hired by the HOA. The project had been approved months earlier, apparently without a single attempt to contact me, notify me, or seek any acknowledgement that the construction might affect rights I held on the land being built upon. I drove directly to the HOA office with my deed and easement documentation in hand, prepared to have a straightforward conversation about an obvious legal problem. Karen, the board's president, greeted me with a particular brand of confident dismissal that people develop when they have operated without meaningful accountability for too long. She smiled. She referenced the community development plan. She characterized my objection as a misunderstanding. When I placed my property records on the desk and walked her through what they documented, she glanced at the papers briefly and pushed them aside with a gesture that communicated, more clearly than any words could have, that she had no intention of engaging with their contents. Her position, delivered with complete assurance, was that the garage would increase property values across the subdivision and that I should identify another route for my access needs. I explained, with as much patience as I could sustain in that moment, that there was no other route. Every parcel surrounding my property belonged to other owners. The recorded easement was not one option among several. It was the only legal pathway connecting my home to the public road, and a permanent structure had just been built across it without my knowledge or consent. Karen's expression did not change. The meeting ended without resolution, and I left her office understanding that whatever came next would not be resolved through conversation. My real estate attorney's reaction the following morning was informative in its own right. He is a measured professional who does not traffic in hyperbole, and when he reviewed the deed, the easement documentation, and the photographs I had taken of the completed garage, the assessment he delivered was unambiguous. The HOA had violated multiple property laws by approving construction over a recorded access easement. This was not a gray area or a matter of competing interpretations. Karen had authorized a project that should never have cleared a basic legal review, and the structure now sitting across my driveway represented a serious and actionable infringement on documented property rights. Formal notices were prepared and delivered immediately, demanding both restoration of access and compensation for damages already sustained. Karen ignored every one of them. She was, around the same period, organizing a ribbon-cutting ceremony to celebrate the garage's completion with the neighborhood. It was during my attorney's deeper review of the property configuration that the situation revealed a dimension neither Karen nor the HOA board appeared to have considered. The garage had been positioned in a way that placed a portion of it on land directly subject to my easement rights. The practical consequence of that positioning was significant. No one could legally access a garage from the most logical approach without crossing to the easement area over which I held documented rights. Karen had not simply built across my access. She had built herself and her entire community into a legal corner, constructing an amenity that was effectively unusable without my cooperation, on land she had no right to encumber, while simultaneously blocking the only route to my home. We filed for an injunction restricting unauthorized use of the easement area, and the judge who reviewed the property record scheduled an emergency hearing without delay. Karen arrived at that hearing with the composure of someone who had not yet fully grasped the ground she was standing on. She left with a considerably different expression. The court confirmed that my easement rights remained fully intact and legally enforceable despite the construction that had been placed across them. More consequentially, the ruling imposed restrictions on unrestricted access to the easement area, which meant that the garage the HOA had just celebrated with a ribbon-cutting ceremony had now become extraordinarily difficult for anyone to actually use. Residents who had anticipated convenient access to the new structure found themselves unable to approach it in the way they had expected. Frustration built quickly. Karen, consistent with the pattern she had established throughout this entire sequence of events, directed that frustration outward, toward contractors, toward timing, toward external circumstances, rather than toward the decisions that had created it. The HOA retained consultants at considerable expense to identify a solution. Every proposal those consultants produced circled back to the same immovable legal reality. My easement rights existed, were valid, were court-confirmed, and could not be circumvented through creative engineering or alternative routing. Months passed. Monthly losses mounted. Board members who had supported the garage project began quietly resigning. Homeowners who had cheered at the ribbon cutting were now demanding explanations at meetings that Karen found increasingly difficult to manage. The institutional confidence that had allowed her to push my property records aside without reading them had been entirely consumed by the consequences of that decision. When Karen requested a private meeting, the dynamic in the room bore no resemblance to our first encounter. She was not presenting a community development plan or suggesting I find another route. She was asking for permission, specifically permission to use the easement she had built across without asking. I reminded her, without any particular satisfaction, but with complete clarity, how many formal notices had gone unanswered and how many opportunities for early resolution had been declined. She acknowledged that the garage project had become a financial and legal disaster for the community. She asked what it would take to reach an agreement. My attorney proposed a formal easement access lease with terms that were straightforward, legally sound, and reflective of the actual value of the rights being requested. Karen rejected the figures immediately, as people sometimes do when they have not yet fully accepted the absence of better alternatives. A month later, having found no better alternatives, she returned ready to negotiate in earnest. The agreement that emerged from several subsequent meetings was binding, documented, and entirely a product of the legal framework Karen had spent months attempting to ignore. The HOA would pay $8,000 per month in exchange for formally granted limited access rights through the easement area. The garage that had been built without my knowledge, across my legal right-of-way, while I was attending a cattle auction, became usable only after a monthly payment was established to compensate for the rights that should have been respected from the beginning. Karen got the access she needed. I received compensation for property rights she had treated as irrelevant, and every month when that payment arrives, it serves as a precise and recurring reminder of something that property owners across this country understand, and HOA boards occasionally need to relearn the hard way. Recorded easements are not administrative suggestions. They are property rights. They are legally enforceable. They do not disappear because someone with institutional authority decides they are inconvenient, and the deed, in the end, always outranks the opinion.